The black ship drifted silently at the edge of the Gryth Nebula, its dark hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Energy fields shimmered faintly along its frame, a sign of the ship's adaptive defenses recalibrating after the temporal jump. Inside the command deck, the atmosphere was taut, every console humming with restrained power while fractured holograms flickered like ghosts above the central interface. This was no ordinary rendezvous. It was a gamble teetering on the edge of betrayal and necessity. Beyond the viewport, a second vessel materialized, sleek, angular, and unmistakably Zaltheri. The alien ship glowed with iridescent patterns that flowed like liquid across its hull, a silent language of status and intent. This faction of the Zaltheri had once led brutal assaults against human outposts, their biosynthetic weapons carving through defenses like sand under a tide. Now, they were here under a parley signal, proposing what the fractured remnants of humanity could hardly afford to ignore, an alliance against a greater threat. Inside the black ship's negotiation chamber, the tension thickened as two figures stood across from one another. One, clad in adaptive battle armor with micro-servos humming at each subtle movement, represented the last embers of human resistance. The other, taller and unnervingly still, bore the chitinous plating and luminous ocular implants of the Zaltheri envoy. The air between them crackled not with hostility, but with the weight of desperation. A translucent orb hovered between the delegates, projecting schematics in rapid succession, advanced particle lances, gravitic mines, and a new form of shielding derived from quantum phase harmonics. Technologies neither side could achieve alone. The Zaltheri, once conquerors, had been pushed to the brink by the dominion and empire of biomechanical conquerors that viewed both humans and Zaltheri as little more than raw material for assimilation. Now, survival demanded collaboration. Yet trust was scarcer than resources. The envoy's voice, modulated and layered, resonated through the chamber. Shared strength, or assured extinction. The accord binds us until Dominion fleets are ash. The human representative's jaw tightened. The black ship's ancient systems had already confirmed the weapon's potential, but alliances forged in desperation often fractured under pressure. And there was something in the envoy's stance, an undercurrent of withheld truth, like a card kept close to the chest. Outside, automated drones swept the perimeter, their sensor nets intertwined with the Zaltheri's living surveillance nodes. The nebula's shifting light bathed both ships in an eerie glow, as if the universe itself held its breath. This was not peace. It was a ceasefire wrapped in cold pragmatism, with promises sharp enough to draw blood. In the heart of the black ship, deep within its ancient core, algorithms stirred. The vessel itself seemed to recognize the weight of the moment, its internal lights dimming, systems rebalancing for contingencies neither side had spoken aloud. This deal, fragile as starlight on water, would either forge a path to salvation or collapse under the gravity of old grudges and new betrayals. The chamber's cold light reflected off polished obsidian panels, casting elongated shadows as the two figures stood locked in silent calculation. The human representative, Commander Rillick, wore the scars of years spent navigating survival, both on the battlefield and in the fractured halls of post-invasion diplomacy. His armor, though sleek and fitted with adaptive plating, bore faint etchings, personal reminders of fallen squads and lost colonies. Each mark told a story of betrayal, resilience, and sacrifice. Opposite him stood Vorath, the Zaltheri envoy. Taller by a head, Vorath's form was an elegant fusion of organic plating and biosynthetic musculature. His exoskeletal ridges shifted subtly with each breath, luminescent veins tracing pathways along his collarbone and wrists. The Zaltheri, once feared across human space, had been fractured by their own arrogance, splintered into warbands after Dominion dreadnoughts cut through their home sectors. Vorath's presence here was not just political, it was personal. His clutch kin had been culled, their genetic imprints erased from the Zaltheri databanks, a cultural annihilation the Dominion wielded like a scalpel. The negotiation orb between them flickered as the black ship's core intelligence, designated Kirath, processed risk assessments in real time. Rillick's neural implant pinged softly in his ear, feeding him cascading probabilities: true success, 37%. Betrayal likelihood, 62%. Potential gain, strategic edge, high. He ground his teeth. The odds were worse than he'd hoped, but desperation rarely left room for ideal choices. Vorath's voice, layered and resonant, broke the silence. We offer more than weapons. Tactical data on Dominion patrol routes. Phase-shift cloaking algorithms. These he gestured toward the holographic schematics of sleek gravitic lances, designed to pierce Dominion hulls at molecular destabilization points. Other tools to survive. But the accord demands reciprocity. Rilik's brow furrowed. Reciprocity. The word echoed with implication. It wasn't just about sharing intel or coordinating strikes. The Zaltheri never negotiated without ensuring leverage, and the flicker of hesitation in Vorath's otherwise precise movements betrayed an unspoken condition. What's the price? Rilik's voice was flat, cold. He'd traded too many lives on promises dressed in necessity. Vorath's gaze intensified, his inner eyelids flickering a Zaltheri tell of discomfort. The Arc Shard. It resides within your vessel's vault. We detected its signal the moment our vessels linked comm channels. He stepped forward, the bioplating along his spine rippling. Return it to us, and the accord holds. Rilik stiffened. The Arc Shard wasn't just an artifact, it was ancient Dominion tech, scavenged during the fall of the Vega Line. The Black Ship had sealed it deep within its quantum vault, recognizing its potential not just as a power source but as a control node for higher-tier Dominion command protocols. With it, the Zaltheri could bypass Dominion firewalls, but it could just as easily tip the balance of power in their favor once the Dominion threat was neutralized. The chamber dimmed as the ship's AI, Keyrath, projected an encrypted feed directly into Rilik's ocular overlay. Arc Shard, quantum entanglement matrix stable. Potential risk, unpredictable cascade failure if improperly integrated into Zaltheri systems. Recommendation, denied transfer. Rilik exhaled slowly. He glanced at the floating schematics of the promised weapons: particle lances, gravitic mines, adaptive shield generators. Humanity needed every edge to survive the next wave of Dominion incursions. Without this alliance, fractured resistance fleets scattered across contested systems would fall within weeks. But the Arc Shard? It wasn't just a bargaining chip, it was the last tether to an offensive capability humanity couldn't replicate. Vorath, reading the hesitation, leaned in. You doubt our intent. But consider this, human. Without us, your people scatter like dust. With us, the Dominion fractures. And when victory comes, his luminescent eyes narrowed. The Shard ensures no power rises unchecked. Balance, not conquest. Rilik's implant flared again, deception probability, 28%. Tactical gain, significant. Long-term risk, unclear. The weight of choice pressed down, heavier than the void outside. Behind them, the Black Ship's systems flickered momentarily as Keyrath recalculated contingencies. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what came after, who held the reins of power once the Dominion fell. And deep down, Rilik knew there was no clean choice. Only the lesser devil and the cost of walking alongside it. Beyond the tense negotiations between Rilik and Vorath, another current of conflict simmered within the Black Ship. Deep in the ship's lower decks, Lieutenant Arian, the vessel's chief systems specialist, paced along the auxiliary command corridor. Her neural relay blinked softly, tethered to the ship's secondary AI node. While the command deck focused on the truce, Arian had intercepted an anomalous data packet piggybacking on the Zaltheri's handshake protocols. The code wasn't just surveillance, it was a silent probe, mapping the Black Ship's internal architecture. Someone within the Zaltheri envoy was already planning contingencies, regardless of how the negotiations ended. Arian swiped through the holographic display projected from her wrist module, isolating the packet's origin. It didn't root from Vorath's flagship, but rather from a shadow signature docked on the far side of the Zaltheri flotilla, a stealth skiff, running under Old Dominion encryption. Her comm implant buzzed. It was Nero's, the Black Ship's tactical analyst. Arian, you seeing this? His voice crackled through the secure channel. That skiff isn't Zaltheri standard. It's running Dominion subroutines adaptive, cloaked. Someone's playing both sides. Arian's stomach tightened. If Dominion sympathizers had infiltrated the Zaltheri factions, the fragile truce was already compromised. She flicked a command, tightening the ship's firewall around the quantum vault where the arc shard rested. But the probe was sophisticated, worming past initial barriers like liquid code, testing the black ship's defenses without tripping primary alerts. Someone didn't just want the shard, they wanted the entire command matrix that controlled it. Nero's continued, his tone sharp. I've cross-referenced the encryption signature. It's key to an old Dominion defector tag someone named Valen Tar, flagged as Chris R-class infiltrator. If he's running that skiff, this whole truce is a setup. Arian cursed under her breath. Valen Tar. A former Dominion tactical operative who vanished after the Vega line fell. Rumors painted him as a broker of power, selling Dominion secrets to fractured factions, always playing one side against the other to maintain chaos. If he was here, the Zaltheri envoy might not even know they were compromised. On the command deck, Rilik's conversation with Vorath pressed forward, the arc shard still the central bargaining chip. Arian didn't hesitate. She patched directly into the bridge's private channel. Commander, we've got a ghost in the system. Dominion encryption, non-Zaltheri skiff, running infiltration probes. This isn't just a deal, it's a setup. Vorath must have noticed the flicker in Rilik's expression because the Zaltheri envoy stepped forward, voice sharp with suspicion. What changes, human? Your demeanor shifts. Rilik didn't break eye contact. He toggled an encrypted line back to Arian. Can you isolate the skiff? Scramble its comms. Already trying, Arian shot back. But if Valen Tar is running this, he's 2 steps ahead. I need higher tier clearance to override external locks. Rilik clenched his jaw. Keyrath, Lockdown Protocol Theta 7. Cut all external data streams except priority command. The ship hummed as emergency lockdown protocols engaged. Vorath's eyes flared, the bioluminescence along his temple spiking. What deception is this? Rilik spoke coldly. Your people aren't the only ones at the table, Vorath. There's a third party piggybacking on your comms. Dominion aligned. If this truce was meant to be real, someone in your ranks has already sold you out. For the first time, Vorath hesitated, his hand flicking across his wrist-mounted interface. A glyph shimmered into existence, Zaltheri threat level clearance. His second-in-command, stationed aboard the Zaltheri cruiser Valkresh, appeared in a miniature holo projection. Her segmented plating fluttered in agitation. Envoy, she rasped, we've detected cloaked transmissions routed through tertiary diplomatic channels. Origin unknown. Stealth skiff on the outer ring, broadcasting Dominion relay codes. The truth settled like gravity into the chamber. This wasn't just an uneasy alliance, it was a baited trap, one designed to fracture any chance of cooperation. And now, both sides stood at the edge of betrayal, with the arc shard as the prize and an unseen predator circling the board. Rilik's eyes narrowed. Looks like we're both being played, Vorath. Question is, do we settle our fight here, or take out the real threat before it closes the noose? The silence stretched thin in the command chamber, broken only by the soft hum of the black ship's containment fields. Rilik's gaze locked with Vorath's, both leaders calculating the weight of betrayal. The flickering hologram of the Dominion relay code spun slowly between them, an undeniable sign that trust was already unraveling. Vorath's crest of bioluminescent spines dimmed slightly, a sign of controlled fury. You accuse my kin of treachery while standing in the heart of your warship. Bold. Foolish. His voice was sharp, but there was hesitation beneath the venom. Rilik stepped forward, palms open but eyes cold. I'm not accusing your people. I'm telling you we've both been compromised. That skiff didn't appear by chance. Someone wants this alliance to burn before it even sparks. A flicker of doubt passed across Vorath's face. The Zaltheri envoy glanced at his wrist console, where his second-in-command's transmission still lingered. It confirmed Rilik's words. Betrayal wasn't just a possibility, it was already unfolding. Arian's voice crackled through the private link in Rilik's ear. "I've traced the skiff's intrusion path. It's tunneling through our secondary arrays, bypassing Zaltheri protocols entirely. This isn't sloppy work, it's precision sabotage." Rilik exhaled slowly, gaze never leaving Vorath. "We can stand here trading threats while the real enemy slips through the cracks, or we can stop the bastard pulling our strings. What's it going to be, Vorath? Pride or survival?" The Zaltheri's jaw tightened, the iridescent sheen on his skin darkening. He hated humans. Rilik could see it in the stiff posture, the barely restrained contempt. But survival was a language older than hatred. Vorath hissed softly, a sound of reluctant agreement. "Survival," he rasped. "But understand this, human. If you betray me after this moment, I will crush you and burn your ship to cinders." Rilik almost smiled. "Deal." The tension didn't dissolve, it shifted, like tectonic plates grinding beneath fragile ground. The alliance was forged not in trust, but in necessity, brittle and dangerous. Vorath tapped his console, issuing silent commands to his ship. His second-in-command's voice returned, tense and clipped. "Shadow skiff moving. Positioning for extraction. It's targeting the vault core." Rilik's heart hammered. "The arc shard." "Arian," he snapped, full lockdown on the vault. "Authorization, Delta Prime override." "Already on it," she replied. "But the encryption's evolving like it's predicting my countermeasures. Whoever's running this isn't just skilled, they know our systems. They've studied us." Nero's cut in, voice sharp. "That means they're after more than the shard. If they crack our quantum relay, they'll have access to fleet-wide defense codes." Rilik swore under his breath. It wasn't just about power, it was about control. If the infiltrator gained access, they could cripple both the human resistance and the Zaltheri fleets with a single strike. Vorath's eyes narrowed. "Then we hunt them together. My hunter-seekers will board the skiff. You keep your vault sealed." Rilik nodded. "Do it. But if your people cross the vault threshold, this truce ends." "Agreed." For a brief, fragile moment, enemies became allies, bound by the thin thread of shared peril. The black ship's lights dimmed as battle protocols engaged, casting the bridge in cold, sterile light. The war they'd been fighting had just shifted targets, and the Devil's deal was sealed in necessity, not trust. The black ship trembled as the hunter-seekers breached the skiff's outer hull. Silent pulses of light rippled through the command chamber, signaling the assault's progress. Rilik watched the tactical display, every breath measured. Vorath stood beside him, arms crossed, his bioluminescence flickering in rhythmic anticipation. "Breach complete," Arian reported, voice tight. "Hunter-seekers are inside. Minimal resistance." "Too minimal." Rilik's gut twisted. "Pull them back. Now." But the order came too late. The screen flickered, then snapped to black. The hunter-seeker's vitals flatlined in unison. Vorath snarled. "What trick is this, human?" "No trick," Rilik muttered, already shifting to manual controls. He overlaid the skiff's internal sensors on the hologram. The results froze him in place. There were no life signs aboard, none. The skiff was empty, a shell running on automated subroutines. It had never been the threat itself. "It's a diversion," Rilik realized, horror dawning. "They wanted us focused here while the real play unfolded elsewhere." "The vault." "Arian." Rilik barked. "Status on the arc shard?" Static filled the comms. The flickering of the lights intensified. Across the chamber, the Zaltheri envoy's crest flared in alarm. I've lost contact with the vault, Arian's voice finally returned, strained and glitching. But the shard's energy signature, it's fluctuating, like it's resonating with something. Voratha's eyes darkened. Resonance? That's impossible without a second, sharper tremor rocked the ship, cutting him off. This one didn't come from outside but deep within the black ship itself. Warning glyphs flared crimson across every console. Rillick spun toward the master display. What the hell was that? Nero's voice broke through, strained. Temporal distortion localized around the vault. It's not just a hack, they're trying to trigger a phase fold inside the ship. Rillick's blood ran cold. Phase folds weren't just for travel, they could fracture reality itself if misused. If someone folded the shard out while leaving even a fragment of its energy trace behind, it could destabilize the entire core of the black ship, tearing it apart from within. The skiff was never the prize, Rillick muttered. The shard was bait. This was about the ship itself. Vorath stiffened. Explain. Rillick's jaw tightened. They don't want the shard. They want control of the black ship's phase core, its ability to bend space and time. With that, they could bypass any Dominion blockade, strike anywhere without warning. And worse, they could erase entire fleets from existence without firing a shot. Voratha's crest dimmed in horror. Who would dare risk such devastation? The answer came from the shadows of the chamber, where a figure flickered into view, a projection, grainy and distorted but unmistakable in its form. Not human. Not Zaltheri. A Dominion overseer. Congratulations, the overseer's synthetic voice rasped, smooth yet hollow. You finally realized you were never the target. Your ship was always the prize. And now, you will either hand it over or watch it collapse into a singularity with all hands aboard. The projection flickered, then stabilized. Behind the overseer, Dominion dreadnoughts emerged from the fold, their weapons already primed. Vorath stepped forward, seething. You would sacrifice your own saboteurs for a chance at power? The overseer's hollow gaze turned toward him. Sacrifice? No. Evolution. Those agents were merely temporary assets. Replaceable. As are you. The projection blinked out. Alarms blared as Dominion boarding pods launched toward the black ship, latching onto the hull like predatory insects. The fragile alliance between human and Zaltheri now faced an impossible choice: fight together and risk annihilation, or betray each other for a chance at survival. Rillick clenched his fists, voice cold and resolute. Looks like the devil's deal just got worse. You still in, Vorath? The Zaltheri leader's spines flared to full brightness, a deadly grin spreading across his sharp features. I never liked that overseer anyway. Ship's core throbbed with unstable energy, its deep hum reverberating through the hull as the final Dominion boarding pod was jettisoned into the void. Sparks rained down from fractured conduits, casting fleeting shadows across the command chamber. Rillick stood at the central console, eyes locked on the pulsating glyph representing the ship's phase core flickering between stability and collapse. Phase resonance is stabilizing, Arian reported, voice tight with exhaustion. The shard's energy signature is fading. Whatever feedback loop they triggered, it's breaking apart. Across the chamber, Vorath wiped streaks of luminous blood from his jaw, his bioluminescent spines flickering with defiant light. The overseer underestimated us. Dominion arrogance remains their greatest flaw. Rillick didn't smile. He couldn't. The price of survival had been steep. The saboteurs were dead, but the damage they'd wrought would take cycles to fully repair. More than that, the fragile alliance with the Zaltheri now rested on fractured trust and mutual desperation. We held the line, Rillick muttered, more to himself than anyone else. But they'll be back. Stronger. Smarter. Vorath stepped closer, his gaze sharp. And when they return, we will not be scavengers fighting for scraps. We will be hunters armed with the knowledge of their tactics and the power they sought to steal. Rillick glanced toward the sealed vault, now encased in reinforced plating etched with Zaltheri warding runes. The Ark Shard, once a beacon of hope and danger, was dormant once more, its radiance dulled, its purpose obscured by the weight of history and betrayal. Knowledge and power, Rillick echoed, his tone bitter. Two sides of the same blade. Every deal we make, every alliance we forge, it cuts deeper. Arian's voice broke the silence. Incoming transmission. Encrypted, non-Dominion origin. It's faint, barely holding together. Rillick exchanged a glance with Vorath. Without a word, he activated the receiver. The display sputtered to life, revealing a fractured star map overlaid with unfamiliar coordinates. A single phrase scrolled across the screen, written in an ancient dialect long thought lost. The accord was broken. The accord can be reforged. Vorath's spines dimmed in recognition. That cannot be. The Eclipse Accord died with the First Dominion conquest. Every faction swore never to speak of it again. Rillick frowned, mind already racing. The Eclipse Accord, an alliance older than recorded human spacefaring history, formed in the shadows of the First Dominion incursion. If fragments of it still existed, so did the possibility of resistance on a scale the Dominion feared. They wanted the ship, Rillick murmured, eyes narrowing. But someone else wanted us to survive to see this. He shut down the display, turning toward the viewport where the wreckage of Dominion pods drifted like fractured bones against the endless void. This changes everything, Rillick said quietly. We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for what was lost. Vorath's gaze hardened, his posture shifting from wary ally to resolute warlord. Then let us fight not as pawns of circumstance, but as architects of rebellion. The black ship's engines rumbled back to life, the stabilizers locking into place as the phase core cooled to a steady, determined glow. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with betrayal and sacrifice, but for the first time in countless cycles, it was theirs to choose. As the ship drifted into the shadows of the fractured star map, Rillick allowed himself a rare moment of quiet resolve. The Devil's deal had been struck and survived, but the true cost remained unknown. One thing, however, was certain. The war had just evolved. And this time, the black ship would not sail alone.